Hello, everyone. I'm Yashawn Pokrell,
My name is Cameron Cummings.
and welcome to the 18th episode of the PB Political Podcast. Today, we talk to Haeden Wright. Haeden is the United Mine Workers of America, or UMWA, Auxiliary President for Locals 2245 and 2368, and she joins us to discuss the ongoing Warrior Met coal strike in Brookwood, Alabama. The Warrior Met strike, miners have been on strike since April 1st, 2021, and recently have begun to gain widespread attention for their efforts. In addition to their efforts, hundreds of unionizations in companies such as Starbucks and Amazon have followed, and we will discuss those as well as the Warrior Met strike.
Make sure to follow the PB Political Podcast everywhere where you listen to us. Check out pbpolitical.com and leave us a 5-star review. Thank you and enjoy the episode.
Haeden Wright, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm finally glad that we could get together to talk about the Warrior Met strike.
Yeah, so just real quick, for those of you who don't know, we've been trying to get this set up for 2 months now, so it's just cool to finally get this done, and it's going to be really good. So, Cam, if you want to start us off a little bit, yeah.
I know a little bit later, Ishan's going to give a lot of the history and the background of it, but we just wanted to hear your background, what you do, and why you think what you do is so important.
Okay, well, actually, y'all kind of picked a special day. This is actually day 500 of the strike, so it is the longest strike in Alabama history.
Congratulations.
So that's pretty historic.
Congratulations.
Not
yes.
necessarily a milestone or a goal that you look to achieve, but hey, here we are, and we've managed to hold out against corporate greed and Warrior Met, who's funded by Blackrock, for over 500 days on strike. So that's pretty incredible. So we actually went on strike of April 1st of 2020. And we're on an unfair labor practices strike. For those that aren't listening, there's several different types of strikes that give you different protections under the NLRB. So for us, they're not allowed to hire permanent replacement workers because we're on an unfair labor practices. If you strike for pay, those regulations are a little bit different. And there's also a thing called wildcat strikes, to where you call a strike maybe without your entire union backing it. So for us, we were supported by our union. Starting April 1st, we walked out, and we've been holding picket lines, demonstrations, rallies, pretty much weekly since then. So it's been a long time to be on strike. But what led to that unfair labor practice strike was way back in 2015, 2016. What was Jim Walter Resources, which then transitioned to Walter Energy, filed for bankruptcy. Well, what happened there was that the judge let them out free and clear from all their debts. And they considered the working class people, the miners and their families, to be a part of that company's debts. So they weren't required to pay their pensions. They weren't required to let the union workers come back to work. So in order to protect our pensions, the UMWA had to fight for over a year. And that only didn't just benefit us. That actually benefited all workers. It actually got legislation passed where companies couldn't do that anymore. You couldn't have worked somewhere for 30 or 40 years and all of a sudden say, we don't owe you anything. So that was something huge that came out of this bankruptcy. But for us, it meant we accepted a contract with major concessions. And we're talking about concessions that were over $6 an hour in cuts in pay, which is huge on its own. We went from having 100% health care coverage, because this is an extremely dangerous job. Black lung cases are actually on the rise for the first time in like 25 years. It's hard on your body. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but is there a reason for that happening? Like external circumstances or just naturally?
Well, it naturally kind of comes in cycles, but one of the big reasons is there is several mines that have opened up that aren't union mines, that don't have the same safety measures in place. They don't make things necessarily like respirators, make sure they're kept up to date. A lot of what people mine, not necessarily here in Brookwood, but in other places, have a lot of like dust, rock dust, and silica dust, which also increases the likelihood of black lung. We have members that are as young as in their 40s that are actually showing signs of black lung. So having good health insurance is essential, and this contract knocked it down to where we had an 80-20 coverage for insurance. So you're looking at several $1,000s in family deductibles every year on top of taking that massive cut in pay. And then the strike policy that they implemented was after 3 strikes, you were fired. They didn't take doctors' excuses. So you could be in the hospital, and if you couldn't report 24 hours ahead of time that you were going to be sick, you'd be given a strike. If you missed more than 2 days in a row, you could be terminated. So that was huge. They didn't take concessions for, like, if I know personally members who were having a miscarriage, their husband was underground. It took them over an hour to even get him on the phone, and he was told that if he left work, he would receive a strike. It would be an early out. I know my own husband, when I was in labor, I tried not to call him until he'd be off work. It wasn't until the doctor was like, no, we don't have time, that I even called to tell him I was in the hospital, because I knew that he was going to receive a strike if he left early to come to the hospital. I mean, the toll emotionally that takes on families, as your family's having to decide, is this emergency something that is worth risking your spouse's job over? I mean, it was horrific, and we did that for 5 years. So on April 1st, we had enough, and we said, we're not going to take this anymore. 2 weeks after we went on strike, they offered a tentative agreement. It was basically a slap in the face. It offered a $1.50 pay raise over the course of the contract. It kept the insurance in an 80-20 plan. It didn't address the concerns we've been having with our families. So it was voted down almost unanimously, and over 95% of the membership voted no.
Okay, yeah. So that was a lot of information, just out of the gate. So I do want to dial it back a little bit, go a little bit into labor union history, because it's very fascinating. It's very rich history in the United States itself, and I think it's a little. I know a lot of schools. It's a big problem within schools and within education systems. Do you want to teach it? Do you not want to teach it? So just a little quick recap of like the highlights of the labor union movement in the United States. 1794. That's the first union in the United States in Philadelphia, named the Federal Society of Journeymen Cordwainers. It was a shoemaking union, and they really wanted to shorten their work days. They wanted to establish price minimums so they could be paid a guaranteed price. So this was starting to pop up around the country. 1886, the American Federation of Labor, the AFL, probably the most famous, most known, well-known union in the United States, was founded, and it still remains as one of the. And now it's merged into the AFL-CIO. I know that, but it's still one of the biggest unions in the country. This this was rising as the Industrial Revolution came. More unions came about, more factory jobs. 1911, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire killed 150 people, many women and children in the east side of New York City's Lower East Side. And this led to more calls for unionization and more reforms in workplace safety. Fair Labor Standards Act, 1938, under FDR, 40-hour work week, minimum wage. All of this campaigned on by unions. There was one woman, her name escapes me. I think it was, what was her name? Frances Perkins. She was the Secretary of Labor during in FDR's tenure. And she was very big with unions. She really worked with them to push a lot of these things through. And from there, unions boomed as the post-war period came. 35% of the United States in 1954, American workers, 35% of them belonged to a union. And that's the highest the highest population, like union population density in American history. But now it's been declining ever since China was reopened by Secretary Kissinger in the 70s. Union memberships declined as factory jobs have moved overseas. And now we're at 10.3% of American workers in unions, according to the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I just wanted to run through that real quick just to set the scene about why. I mean, recently since COVID, the union movement has came back a little bit, I feel like. And Warrior Met being in our home state, we really wanted to touch on this because it's been over a year, almost a year and a half, and there's really hasn't been any much meaningful coverage within the state or not nationwide. So yeah, I just wanted to run through that real quick. I'll stop talking now, and can you just go through the beginnings of the strike in April and just how it's been received and how you've been able to organize it so efficiently?
Well, I think it really kind of peaked when we did have the tentative agreement meeting. We knew when we voted down that tentative agreement that it was going to be a fight, because they came in and they told us very honestly, they said that we needed to remember Pittston. The Pittston strike, lasted over 10 months with the UMWA. So that kind of gave us a reference that we were going up against a company that was not going to negotiate in good faith and that we were going to be in for a fight. Now, do we have any idea we would now be going on a year and a half? Absolutely not. But once we decided to strike, that's my daughter Everly getting back in the car. So once we decided to go on strike, we had this huge boost to where a lot of us got together and they're like, okay, we now have over 800 families that are going to need support. And we're lucky because we are an established union. The UMWA was actually one of the first integrated unions in the country. So we have a long and established history, which means we do have a strike fund. And you organizing, sometimes I don't think people realize how important that is, to have that strike fund, because that's what really gives you the ability to strike and collectively bargain. So our union has been great. We received strike pay from them. So that's really helped sustain families. They also provided major medical insurance to families at their cost within our union. But for us, several of the wives of the striking miners, we got together and we said, what can we do to help? What can we do to make sure families are fed? Because we had people within the company like Kelly Gant coming into negotiations and saying, we don't have to do anything, we're going to starve you out. So I think having someone tell you that they want your family to starve is a pretty motivating thing. That they don't even see your family as being worthy of having what they need to live. That was pretty, first of all, it's pretty
I'd imagine, yeah.
But it's pretty motivating too, because you're like, okay, then we're going to show you exactly why we don't need you. So we got together and we were like, how can we fundraise? And I had never really used Twitter before. I got on Twitter, made some posts about the strike, like, hey, this is going on in Alabama. We could really use some help down here. And it kind of took off from there. Myself and Connie Jones and Cherry Goodwin and Lori Duncan and Amy Pilkington, we just got together. And then we got with some of the older retirees that had another auxiliary at Local 2397 with Miss Dell and Miss Deborah. And we came together and we started fundraising. We started making pantry bags for families. And what's incredible is that we've been able to keep fundraising and sustain that now for over a year and a half. And not only have we done pantry bags, we also do hygiene products and baby items, because most of us working there are young families. You just heard my 2-year-old daughter. She was just barely 5 months old when we went on strike. So we provide things like formula and diapers, shampoo, body wash, things that people need that sometimes when you're striking at the end of the month, you don't have it in your budget to just go buy those things. Things like diapers that are really expensive, we provide those. And I think that's really helped keep people able to hold the line and to keep fighting this one day longer, to have that just little bit of support and somebody caring about you. And then the other big thing we do is we feed families at the rallies. Every time we have a rally, we provide the food for the families there coming to support.
Cam, go ahead,
Yeah. Kind of what Ishan did, a little history, just like a recap of everything that you've said so far. For anyone listening, obviously you guys have started April 1st, and I mean, me or Ishan did not know you're on your 500th day of the strike. It's located in Alabama, so Tuscaloosa County, so about 45 minutes.
Hold on. Is she frozen, or I don't know if the connection's a little broken. The sound is good.
Yeah.
I don't know. Sorry. Yeah, I think she kind of froze. So I was.
Yeah, no, we'll wait.
Yeah. We'll be right back, and we're back. Sorry about the delay. Now go.
Okay, so as you said, going into a lot of the history, just a little recap of everything that was said so far about the strike. Obviously, the Warrior Met Coal Strike began April 1st, 2021. Now, today, as of recording, day, is located in Brookwood, Alabama, so Tuscaloosa County, about 45 minutes from Birmingham. And the reason they're striking is over the company that failed off their contract from the miners, with mining being a really serious and I would say life-threatening job. How do I say this? The benefit needed for them are being stripped away. Warrior Met reached a revenue of up to $4.3 billion, and with workers sacrificing $1.1 billion in costs. NLRB, which is the National Labor Relations Board found merit in the unfair labor practice charges in the bargaining tactics from Warrior Met, as that was stated earlier. What I wanted to go into that from that is with being a little up and down, everything changing, prices increasing on almost everything, including gas, groceries, baby formula, everything along those lines. How has that affected your budget, and how has that affected the strike as a whole?
Well, to start with, for us in the auxiliary, it's really affected our budget because we only budget about $8,000 a month is how much we have to feed families through the pantry bags every week, to feed at the rallies, and provide those kind of hygiene and baby items. So what we were doing is we were ordering in bulk the shampoos, conditioners, toothpaste, and things like that from the Dollar Tree. Well, even that has now gone up to $1.25, which doesn't seem like much, but when you're talking about buying something of 400 quantity-wise every month, that was a huge strain on our budget. We had to go back and account for that. What the union has done to combat that with other prices is when we started out having a $400 a week strike pay, they've increased that to $500 a week. So that's helped. Also, any donations that go into the strike aid fund set up by International, once we reach a certain amount to where checks can be cut, they'll give an extra $200 check to families. So that's been crucial to keeping things going. But yeah, I mean, inflation has definitely hurt because when you're trying to feed not just one family, but you're trying to make sure you have food and supplies for 800 families. I mean, when things go up even a few cents each, that adds up over time to be a huge amount of money. Then you have to adjust for that. So I know one thing that we're about to go back to doing is we're really going to have to do some more fundraising because as it stands, we have enough to last about 6 more weeks. And, you know, I'm not sure if y'all are following the strike last year, but we did the big Solidarity Santa. I mean, we just did our second round of back to school. Now we're looking at doing Christmas again. Because one thing we need to realize and talk about is once you even get a tentative agreement presented, which there hasn't even been talks of that happening, but once we did meet for a tentative, you have a week for members to vote. Then it takes 2 weeks to call people back to work, and then another month before you get a paycheck. So, I mean, we're already getting close to where we're going to have to start planning what can we do to support families over the holidays.
Yeah, we'll definitely put any donation links or anything in our description. But yeah, so it's obviously been hard for families. That's obvious. I don't get though. So like, it's obvious. It's also bad for Warrior Met. I mean, they're losing a whole facility. So why hasn't there been a real how is I'm sure you have bargainers going to the table. Maybe I don't know if you do, but how has there been no movement on any tentative agreement so far? And when do you think, or do you think that there will be one in hopefully the near future?
So what has kind of hurt with that, we've even had Blackrock, like you said, even Blackrock, which we know is a vulture capitalist group. I mean, they're private equity, they're vulture capitalists. They come in, they buy up properties in bankruptcy, businesses in bankruptcies, they bleed them for as much as they can. They don't typically care about the communities or workers that they're exploiting or hurting. They don't typically care about that. Even they put out a statement that was like, you need to do something. We're losing a lot of money. This is okay. And so
I think we've lost you here. Sorry for this, everybody. This just as a whole, our state is very spotty in connection, and I think you've been cutting out there for really the whole. Cam, she's cutting out for you too, right? It's just for me.
Yeah, I can't hear. No.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that, guys. We'll be right back. Yeah, we need to fix our power grid. So start recording. You were talking about Blackrock before you cut out. We're back, guys, by the way. Sorry about that. We have a horrible power grid in this state. But you're talking about Blackrock and how they've been supporting your strike a little bit. That's a little surprising. So can you just go over that again one more time?
Well, Blackrock did put out a couple months ago a letter to Warrior Met CEOs and the ones that like at the bargaining table and said that this has gone on long enough. We're losing money. This strike is not good for us or your investors. You need to come to the table and negotiate. They didn't get there on their own. We've picketed outside of their offices in New York numerous times. We've had 2 major demonstrations there, and then small groups of members there almost every other week, there for several months. So they were basically pressured into making a stand, and they did side with the workers. But what we haven't seen is the actual people in charge at Warrior Met, which let's make sure people understand. These are the same people in these management positions that caused the bankruptcy in the first place. We still have Kelly Gant, Walt Scheller, all the higher up executives actually made money on the bankruptcy, and they kept their jobs with raises. So we already knew what was coming. Then they brought in Jack Richardson at the bankruptcy. What he's known for is going in and trying to bust the unions in every place that he comes to work at. So this has nothing to do with their ability to pay or even their ability to compensate workers. They have even said, and this is actually, I can show the document, they have actually said on record that they have the ability to pay everything that we're asking for. They do not have the desire to. That's the type of people we're working with.
Yeah, it's not great. And again, just, I don't know if we did, Cam, you did say this, but again, the miner in 2016 when this company was, Warrior Met was on the brink of bankruptcy. The miners in this position, some of them, well, most of them, I'm sure, working today and striking today, they've sacrificed their wages and their time off. So they really saved the company in a way. And so the whole strike, again, just to clarify, it's just to get back to those original wages, right, that you had in 2016?
Yes, that's correct. All that we were asking for is what we gave up under the assumption and what we had been told that, hey, if y'all take these concessions, we get back to where we're profitable, then you can get these things back. But then Warrior Met showed that they were, again, dishonest, and that's not what happened. And in some of the most recent contracts, they have this vague list. And they say, well, we'll do some of the stuff that y'all want, but you have to let us fire 37 people, but we're not going to tell you who they are. And the union can't represent them. So we're not going to bring back these 37, but we might offer you something if you'll agree that we can get rid of them. That's not how a union works. We're not going to vote that you could say that the union can't represent 37 brothers or sisters. So they're constantly playing games to make it look like they're trying to negotiate in good faith, when in actuality, they're not.
Cam, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, so outside of that, Blackrock is finally trying to get them to make a push for a stand. Do you see any, cracks, anything being formed, anything shown that something will be coming soon? Because I know you said you have about 6 weeks until you're going to have to look for different sort of funding. Is there anything that you see, like any light at the end of the tunnel, as small as it may be?
I mean, the union, we're offering them dates. When we offer them dates to negotiate, they cancel. They pick the very last possible date that's offered. We've asked to meet in person. Not myself personally, but, our negotiating team has asked them, can we come to the table, actually meet in person, and let's get this done? Warrior Met refuses to do that. They've refused all in-person meetings. When we offer dates, they pick the last possible date that they can select. So at this point, we're waiting on them to decide that they want to stop being evil and they want to do the right thing.
And there's more than, this isn't, the Brookwood's not the only Warrior Met, mine. So how have I'm sure, there are others, right? It's not just, it can't just be Brookwood, right? There's more locations of Warrior Met.
No, Warrior Met, we have several locals that are all considered Warrior Met coal. So what
Really?
Warrior Met coal is, it has several mine sites. So number 7 mine is local 2397. Number 4 mine is local 2245. And 5 prep plant is local 2368. And then we have Central Shop and Supply, which is local 2497. So there's actually 4 union locals on strike at this one corporation.
So, okay, so just to clarify, this is the only mining sites for Warrior Met are in, like, around Birmingham, Tuscaloosa.
Yes, the only
Okay.
ones that are, Warrior Met coal.
Okay.
Now, yeah, we have other UMWA locals
Yeah,
that
yeah.
are Oak Grove, Shoal Creek.
Okay.
They're also metallurgical mines.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering. Because the $4.3 billion in the post 2016 from this area just kind of astounding. And I thought there was more, honestly. I guess I didn't look into it a lot. A little bit more about just how is the NLRB, so the National Labor Relations Board, they were not govern unions, but they really tried to do their best to help unions get off the ground. In theory, at least, I don't know the particulars. President Biden has been very pro-union in his rhetoric. He was promising to be the most pro-union president in history, or since FDR, I believe, during his campaign. How has the NLRB stepped in? Have they been able to offer any real tangible support? And just has there been any higher up support from Washington D.C. or wherever these companies and organizations are headquartered?
You just talked about a lot of people making claims and saying things. Those actions aren't actually taking place. Where we have gotten support, we actually have support from Bernie Sanders. He has actually sent food down for the strikers. He actually held a Senate hearing about private equity and how that was affecting the strike here. No statement from Joe Biden at all. And just to clarify that for the ones listening, they're like, oh, well, it must just be that she doesn't like. No, I actually am the SDC, which is the State Democratic Executive Committee representative for District 49. I'm also the Congressional District 6 representative on the board for the Democratic Party and the vice chair of youth for the SDC. So when I'm saying this, I'm saying it with full knowledge that no, the national parties have not really stepped up to support workers. And I'm talking about workers here at Warrior Met that were on strike. They didn't show up for the second time when RWSU was organizing at Amazon. So while we can make claims about being very pro-labor, pro-worker, until we really start pushing legislation like the PRO Act, until we actually start walking the picket lines with workers that aren't just in your back door, until you're ready to get on a plane and hit the pavement with people, no, I can't say anything about someone being the most pro-labor person because that's not my personal experience. Locally, we have had support from our parties. Birmingham DSA has been fantastic. They've done a lot of help and work. Alabama Democrats have done several things, fundraisers. They've been out to show support, but no, not at a national level. As for the NLRB, we have several filings with them. We're still waiting to hear back on several of those, so I'm not going to make comments about ones that are still pending. The Region 10, which is kind of the state, like our state's regional, which is District 10 of the NLRB, has sided with the company and actually has tried to say that they want the union to have to pay $13 million in restitutions for security equipment and in lost product caused by the strike. So what a strike is a labor stoppage. We were approved as an unfair labor practice strike, but you want us to pay for barricades, security cameras that were actually put up before April 1st. They had already bought those. They were in place before it went on strike. So no, right now I would not say that the NLRB, as far as District 10, is supporting workers. The union is fighting that ruling. We don't believe that that's valid, and that's where we're at with that.
And I have one small just a little question. So you said Senator Sanders is since has Senator Sherrod Brown done anything? I know he's a very pro-union senator from Ohio. Has he said anything about this? Just a wonder of mine.
No. Joe Kennedy Jr. has come down and spoke at the rallies and also done some food and support. Elizabeth Warren has done several things with the UMWA in the past, and she also was at the Senate hearing to speak on behalf of the union. But those are really the two major ones within that sector that have really stepped out in support. Mm-hmm. I think AOC has done a couple of tweets, but nothing as far as coming down, raising money, doing anything like that.
Yeah. And we'll come back to this at the end, just a little at the end of this. We want to move a little bit national because there's been a lot of movement on the national front for labor unions, and I know Cam has some questions for that. So if you take it away.
I mean, how do you feel like? I know like a lot of recent unionized, a lot of recent unions are trying to pop up, especially within Starbucks. I know we talked about this and it wasn't recorded. The one in Birmingham, close to UAB, is unionized. I think Starbucks a few months ago had about 1 or 2 unions. Now they're at
189, yeah.
189 stores are now unionized. And one that's been a really big topic of debate has been Amazon unionizing. And a recent successful vote was in Staten Island, New York. And there were similar votes failed, such in Bessemer, Alabama, which was right outside Birmingham, as well as a second Staten Island warehouse also failed. So a lot have been pushed through, but a lot have failed. So how do you feel like your push, your stance, and your efforts are going to affect the national scale, if not now, but in the future?
Well, I think even now, we are very aware that we're not just fighting for our jobs, we're fighting for all workers. Because if we let a company get away with what they're doing to us and we have a union, it's going to set that precedent for workers that don't have that representation at all. So that's one thing that we're fighting here. It's not just for us, not just for union workers, but for all workers. I also want to point out that no organization attempt, if you're organizing, those weren't failures. And actually, the Bessemer RWSU recent election, we're still waiting on the NLRB ruling for that with RWSU. There's actually enough contested ballots that could actually change the outcome of that election. So that one is not over yet. That fight is still on. It's just on hold right now. And I say that because my husband, who is a striking miner in Brookwood, actually, when he found out about the second drive at Amazon back in the end of August, beginning of September, he took a job at Amazon in Bessemer to help with our WDSU. So when they had their rallies and they did their meetings, we showed up for them because that's what a union does. It doesn't matter what your abbreviations are. Those are your union brothers, sisters, and those are my union siblings, and we were showing up to support them. We actually won a Starbucks election in Birmingham here in Alabama. So that's huge. They had a huge majority vote. I think they only had one no vote in that store. So that's in Birmingham. Scottsboro has their election. I think their ballots might go out next week, or their vote might be next week. I mean, it's really soon. I know Birmingham DSA, the Labor Valley Report guys from up in y'all's area in Huntsville, they're actually out there to sip in right now. So there's a lot of labor going on in our state, and there is progress being made, but the mainstream media doesn't want to show that. Because what it does show when you have these labor struggles, that it breaks down all those other divisions, that people are no longer worried about whether they're a Republican or they're a Democrat. They're not worried about what church you go to. They're not worried about anything else. You find a common struggle, and in that common struggle, you find solidarity and you find your own power as the working class together. So I think that labor is very well alive here in Alabama, and I expect to see some more filings soon.
Yeah, it's a good point, especially the media not covering anything. Like I said, I didn't know about this. I read a lot of news, way more than I should, honestly, I think. And I didn't see anything. I heard about it on some podcasts, but I didn't know this was really a thing. I didn't know until I looked into it. I couldn't find good articles about it that weren't, I mean, I could find articles that were pro-union, obviously, but I couldn't find any opposition. There was no subject on it unless you wanted to talk about it. So it was very eye-opening that, yeah, the media, I've never seen a TV segment on it, even local. Cam, have you? I haven't even, yeah. Did you?
No, I haven't seen much about it. It's pretty, even though this is a major thing, it's not highly publicized at all. Not even to a local level, not even around like statewide or even citywide, which I would expect. I even asked a few of my relatives that live in Birmingham if they'd seen anything about it, and they said no as well. So not even close to the area.
Yeah, I think you hit it spot on with the media not wanting to elevate something that brings so much togetherness to people, and they want to focus on division because division brings ratings, which are declining anyways. So, it's like, I mean, what are you even like trying to hold on to at this point? But yeah, nationally, did you talk about the Starbucks that was closed? I don't know if you mentioned that.
No,
okay.
I did not.
Yeah, so
Starbucks
go ahead.
was closed in New York.
After unionizing.
they tried to become. I was correct. New York.
Yeah, I think it was New York, right? I believe so. Yeah.
They tried to unionize and they got shut down before they got passed through, which caused a major. That was extremely publicized.
Well, it's illegal, so that's like.
Yes.
You can't. Yeah. So.
So that was really publicized, and that's a big thing, and that's also opened a lot of people's eyes to unions. So I feel like as bad of a thing that was, it opened a lot of people's eyes and brought it to the forefront of people's minds.
Yeah, and I think sorry to just keep talking just back and forth, but I think that this like the push with unions that we have here, it's coinciding perfectly with some national legislation like the CHIPS Act coming in. About 10-year rollout, I believe, but still, it's now back in the mainstream. It's getting into the mainstream conversation again, and with more manufacturing at home. Tesla's making cars here in the United States now. A lot of other companies are doing that too. As we try to get less globalized, I think the push for unions is coming back, and I do like the way you guys have been leading it down here in Alabama at Warrior Met. Is there anything else you want to add? I think we should wrap this up now. So I think we've talked about really everything. And if you have any closing statements, where people can find you, where they can donate, anything they can do to help, just go ahead and just let it all out.
Well, you can follow me on Twitter. It's just at Haeden Wright. I post updates about the strike. Another good place to find information on Twitter is at Mineworkers, which is the UMWA Twitter. Also at Grim Kim. Kim Kelly has been covering the strike since it started, so that's another good source. Locally in Alabama, Labor Valley reporters, they do good coverage on the strike and other issues in the state. Of course, you guys, everybody should already be following you if they're listening to this podcast, but they should be. And you can donate, and you can find the link to the PayPal on my Twitter. It's pinned at the top. You can also search UMWA Strike Aid Fund. And those funds don't come to the pantry. That goes to the International Strike Aid Fund. And the only other thing I want to invite everyone to, if you're interested in organizing labor, creating a real solidarity movement, I know you might be familiar with Labor Notes. They had the big convention in Chicago.
I've heard of it,
a couple months ago. Yeah. Well, we've actually been working. I'm on the committee, Jacob Morrison, several other people across the state, and they're actually coming to Alabama in October to host a Labor Notes Troublemaker School here at the University of Montevallo. The registration fee is only $30, so you can look up that on the Labor Notes website. It's also on my Twitter page. I'll send y'all the link as well. But I'd really ask for people to come out, make those connections, because our state it's a big state, and there's so many of us that want to be involved in labor and organizing, but you just don't know how to take those first steps. You don't know, how do I get in touch with a union to see what I need to do about getting a union in my workplace? They can show you that there, and you can make those connections there. So I'd really like to tell everybody to come out, register, meet people, and listen to some wonderful discussions and panels.
Yeah. Thank you. We'll definitely put all of these links in. I encourage you guys to check it out. I think labor unions coming back in the future, I think would be a good thing for workers, especially as, I don't want to get too far into it, but, as companies make more money, people make less money, inflation's high, everything's not great right now, so I think it's good to have a little bit of, trying to bring a little bit more of a voice to the table. Cam, anything else? Do you want to promote anything?
No, I have nothing more from my part. I'm just happy to have you on and be able to spread more about your cause, since it's not as publicized as much as we can.
Yeah.
Thank y'all so much for having us here today. I'm glad we finally got together to do this. Sorry about the technical hiccups, but solidarity forever, guys.
Nothing editing can't fix. Yeah, thank you. I'm Ishan Pokrell.
My name's Cameron Cummings.
You guys know where to find us, and goodbye.